signing party for Joe Pollak, his book How Trump Won, and we're just excited to be here.
Oh, we got one, Liz.
There it is. All right.
Did you drop cards?
Have you read the book?
I just picked it up.
Oh, you just picked it up. Tell us what you know about it. Are you excited? And you're excited to read it?
I am looking forward to reading it. I don't know a lot about it. I know very little about it, actually.
So are you with Brietbart?
No, I'm not.
You're straw polling. Are you a pollster?
Oh no, I just came up to find out what's going on with our government. I just came up to find out what's going on with our government.
The reason people love Brietbart so much, and we love Brietbart too, we often cite them in our news sources, it's because they tell people the truth. They're not afraid of the truth. They're not afraid to get out front and make sure that people understand what's really going on. We have such a love and respect for Brietbart News. I've got a story. I shared a cigar once.
Brightside Broadcasting.
Right, and we are with RSBN and with Brightside Broadcasting. I'm Margaret. This is Liz. We're both reporters. She's been an excellent camera guy, and looking at her, she's the most feminine woman in the world, but she's been a fantastic camera guy. So, have you read this? Or?
I have not read it yet. Just picked it up. I just came down to meet Joel and pick up the book.
And we've cornered him, and now we're doing another interview. Have you caught any of CPAC?
I just got here last night, so I caught all today.
Okay. What did you think?
I think it's fascinating to sit down and hear what people are saying. It's a big change that's taking place, and it's nice to be able to hear straight from folks and see what other people are saying about it. Meet people.
Well, there's a shift going on in our country. So, and Steve Bannon actually said this today. He said, "We're not giving it back to you without a fight," and I love that because there's been a monumental victory here with Trump, and the commonality among all of us is that we really love and support our president. And I've been noticing that more and more with CPAC. I will say that we saw Ted Cruz standing over by the side, and even watching him, he's even gotten in line. If you remember, he was making those phone calls, and he began to volunteer for Trump. There was no official endorsement until way later, but that's what we're seeing. We're seeing so many people who just love our president, who love our country, who have a heart for our country. And Brietbart has really been the leader of the helm when it comes to news and the tip of the spear in terms of true news. What do you make of, and Liz and I actually met James O'Keefe last night.
Yeah.
His CNN dump, did you see this? Supposedly he's got the CNN live leaks, and there's really a target for fake news, and if you believe that CNN knowingly tells lies, then you know what? They better mind their P's and Q's. Because
here's what I'm trying to figure out. A lot of my friends on the left are very, very intelligent people that are irrationally frightened right now. And I'm trying to figure out...
Well, it's a brainwashing. So if all you watch is CNN or MSNBC, you're only watching two groups of people that lie to you, that take money from the Saudis to broadcast. I was doing a report where CNN, MSNBC, they're taking money from foreign governments to spout lies that aren't true. Bahrain was one of them, to do a promotional campaign that was soft on radical Islam. Situations like that. So you're really not getting the full story if that's the only thing that you're watching.
They're reading, Washington Post and New York Times. That's primarily what they're getting news from. And it's NPR, and these people are intelligent people that are extremely frightened about what's going on. I'm trying to understand, how to talk to folks, to bring people down to earth and have rational conversations.
They really believed a lie in terms of what's true out there. And, you've got people like Diamond and Silk on the ground. Have you seen these ladies? They were actually at the Trump rally.
I've seen about them. I haven't seen them.
I had the pleasure of interviewing them once, and I've been around reporters in fake news for years. These women like that are on the ground, which is exactly what Liz Willis and I are trying to do, bring people the truth. They're really just very simple. You lay it out, you beat all this hoopla and drama around mainstream media, and you just tell people the truth. I don't mean to corner you.
So when you come to CPAC, you can talk to the folks directly. I was talking to Joel. I was just talking to a reporter from Sweden to really find out what's going on in Sweden, as opposed to what I'm reading in the press. So
well, you got to be careful with that
actually...
because the mainstream media in Sweden is paid by the government, and they're paid to sort of press that issue that there isn't a rape culture going on, that there isn't a Muslim migration problem going on. You're really not getting the true news anyway.
Like Pravda.
Exactly, and I'm of the belief. I lived in Europe
right?
for East
I went to
Russia.
Moscow when it was still communist. It was horrible.
You lived in Russia.
I lived in Russia.
You did?
I did.
Wow. My sister was the only person to ever get a
I love
Soviet
these guys,
citizen.
by the way.
Let's introduce
She was the only
them.
person to ever get a Soviet citizen out of the country through marriage. And she was Sean Hannity's first radio interview ever.
No.
Would you mind introducing yourself to the camera?
Yeah, I'm David Zier. How are you?
I'm good. I think we're all good too.
Good. I have a show, Everything Matters, on Long Island Internet Radio, WLINY.
Say it again in case they missed it.
David Zier with Everything Matters with Ed Munoz and myself, David Zier, and it's WLINY.com.
I'm going to pull on this so they can make sure they're spelling everything right.
Yes, and JVK Media Group is the producers, or are the producers. So I haven't slept in 2 days. Show at 11 o'clock last night, and then I drove down.
Okay, so we have 3 minutes, and then Joel Pollak is going to come in and talk about his book, his new book, and discuss the book signing that's going on right now. So we have 2 more minutes. We're going to go live, and we'll get back to you.
So that was a terrible.
It was beautiful. Everybody's gonna love you. Yeah. You just tell. Oh yeah.
So what do you think of CPAC so far?
CPAC?
Yeah.
CPAC's great. I've been coming for a long time. I used to be a Young Americans for Freedom chapter director back in the 80s. So, you know, William F. Buckley started that. So CPAC was a little bit more wonky back then and nerdy and intellectual, and it's more millennial pop culture.
It's so millennial.
You know, and it's good, but they moved away a little bit from their original agenda. But it's good. It's very professional. You know, and some big names are here, so we're excited.
If we can get Joel Pollak, if we could grab him.
I'm gonna grab him.
You want to grab him?
Okay.
Yeah.
Filmers talk live when he speaks.
Okay, good idea. And we will keep it going live when he is speaking.
Sorry.
Wayne interviewed him earlier. Next
Later?
No, not too much.
I just need a card and send our contact information.
Yeah, he's going to talk.
Florida State.
Yeah.
Do a quick Q&A real quick.
You don't have a seat? Okay. Okay, viewers, thanks for tuning in. We are at a book signing at La Rosa Cantina. Joel Pollak from Brietbart News, senior editor, is going to be giving a question and answer session in just 2 minutes now. So I'll be live streaming that to y'all. If you have any questions, please tweet it in, type it in, let me get it, and let me ask it for you. I'm so excited to be here and to, I'll see what's going on at CPAC. I want you to really feel like you're here. So that's what we're all about. So yeah, any questions, let me know, and I'll deliver it to the author himself.
He's going to do a Q&A.
Have you read the book yet?
I just bought it.
Just new, fresh out, fresh out. Did you get it signed?
Welcome everybody
Perfect, perfect.
to our little book signing for Joel. We really appreciate it. I had the wonderful pleasure of meeting Joel for the first time and another book signing that he had in Chicago with his other book. Many years ago, yeah. And when he ran for Congress against Jan Schakowsky in the 9th Congressional District in Chicago, which we affectionately termed Leningrad by the Lake. And Joel was an outstanding, just ran an amazing campaign. But now he's covering this campaign, and you may purchase books afterward at the back there, and Joel will be able to sign it. I give you Joel Brietbart. Joel from Brietbart.
Thank you so much for this very nice event, and thank you to Regnery for the books and being here and helping out. Thanks to my Brietbart colleagues, Jerome and Del, who are here. And thank you all for coming here. You know, you reminded me, talking about that old book, that was the first CPAC I ever went to, was in 2009, right after President Obama took office. And I had this book, and I was trying to get someone to publish it, and nobody was interested. And I had just published a book with another publisher with an academic press, so I thought people would be more interested. And I was told nobody's really interested in books about the election. And I thought that was interesting because we just have this historic election, Barack Obama. Nobody was buying books about the election, and it's true. Really, nobody bought books about the election. This time around is quite different, and we got this book. Larry Schweikart and I wrote How Trump Won, and suddenly there's this intense interest. And Regnery believed in the book and rushed it through, so we had an ebook before the inauguration, and basically the first book out of any kind at all about how Trump won and about the election. So It's a lot of fun to write, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But I just wanted to add a few notes about CPAC. It used to be over in DC. They moved it to a couple of different hotels, but I'm standing here today as an editor, former editor-in-chief, and now senior editor-at-large at Brietbart, largely because of CPAC. And it was at that CPAC in 2009 that I started making some connections. I had some political connections already because I had worked on the McCain campaign, unfortunately. Yeah, I'd say it was a fortunate experience, but an ill-fated campaign. And I made some very good friends, so those remained in touch. And then went to CPAC the following year, and year after that, and year after that. And one year, when I was kind of trying to figure out what to do next, we ran this congressional race in Chicago. We did an amazing amount of work, raised a lot of money, ran a really fun campaign, and helped bring a lot of conservatives out of the woodwork in Chicago, and many of them are still very active today. And yet we lost. It was Leningrad by the lake, you know. But a lot of good has come out of that election. For example, when James O'Keefe came to me this year and showed me some of the footage he had of what was going on behind the scenes in the Democratic Party, he showed me a reel of footage, and I said, "Do you know who that is in the video?" And he said, "No, I don't know who that is." He said, "That's Jen Schakowsky's husband. That's Robert Creamer." And I explained to him who he was, and that, I think, came out a few months later that he had been behind this effort to incite violence at Trump rallies in order to create a sense of anarchy around the candidate. I write about that a little bit in the book, but so the opposition research that we did still lives on. But I came to CPAC not really knowing what I was doing with myself, and so I came here and I hung out with Andrew, and I had already pitched him on the idea of working with him, and it was in the process of talking over CPAC that we kind of put that together. And so I joined his company when it was very small, when it was still a blog. There were a few employees, and I moved out to LA. My wife was in boot camp in the Navy, so I couldn't tell her anything because she didn't have email, she didn't have a telephone. I had to write her handwritten letters, and I said, "Guess what? We're moving to LA." So we did, and you know, I worked side by side then in Brietbart until his unfortunate passing 5 years ago, and we relaunched the website as a news website, and that has gone spectacularly well. A rather obscure executive named Stephen Bannon was involved, and I worked with him. I worked in his office. I sat at his desk because he wasn't there a lot of the time. And you know, if you want to know anything about Steve, I'll be very glad not to tell you. But you know, obviously you saw him today if you were across the road at CPAC, and he's the reason I believe that the Trump administration has some good prospects, because he, as Ryan Priebus said, praising him from the stage today, Steve never gives up and never quits. And that's the attitude I think he brought to the campaign, and I talk about that a little bit. Although Larry Schweikart actually talks about it more. I was a little constrained in what I could write about Steve because, you know, I work for Brietbart News and I didn't want to write about the company in the book, and you know, have to be very guarded in what I say. I'm also the attorney for the company, so I can't talk about things that happen on a confidential basis. But my co-author is under no such restrictions, and in his chapters, which are clearly identified with his name, he writes about his conversations with Steve Bannon throughout the campaign. The reason that Trump won is manifold, many different reasons. But ultimately, the most important reason that he won was he had issues that he was talking about that nobody else was, for which there was a huge constituency that had been completely overlooked by both parties. And you can look at the data, and I do this a little bit in the book. I've written about it a lot at Brietbart, but if you look at the polling data, Donald Trump started his campaign on June 16th, 2015. He came down the escalator, and right away the media were completely skeptical and hostile. There were stories, I don't know if they're true or not, there were stories that there were paid actors in the lobby, that he couldn't get an audience at his own launch or whatever. I don't know how true that is, I doubt it, but whether true or not, it wasn't a great launch. Immediately plunged into controversy. He said some things about Mexicans and so forth. And you know, I criticized that at the time, writing about it. You know, it could have been more precise. I said it was a good sales pitch, but you know, we don't know what to expect of him and so forth. He languished at the bottom of the polls for about 3 weeks. On July 10th, 2015, he was in 6th place, a distant 6th place. Does anyone remember who was in 1st place on July 10th, 2015?
Scott Walker, right?
No.
Nope.
Nope. Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush was far and away. Jeb Bush was at 18%, and that was way ahead of everybody. Trump was behind Huckabee. You mentioned Huckabee. He was behind Rubio. He was behind Walker. I think Walker was second. Trump was in a distant 6th place among the also-rans. And on that day, Trump met with a group of families that had lost loved ones to murder or drunken driving by illegal aliens. And this group had gone around and tried to meet with politicians for a long time, and nobody had really met with them. But Brietbart News was there, the Associated Press was there, a few other outlets. That story went berserk. It went mega viral to see him standing there. It was also the first time people had seen him off the stage. So he was standing among the families, just on the floor of a hotel conference center lobby, just like an ordinary person, standing there listening to their stories. And that story rocketed him to the lead within days. The next Real Clear Politics average data point is about 9 days later. Trump was in 1st place. He went from 6th place to 1st place, and he never looked back. And yes, the media, his use of media, Twitter in particular, is part of it. The rallies are part of it. There are a lot of things he did that were unique, and I talk about those in the book, and we can talk about them here as well. But if you want to look at the moment where he really took control of the race, it's when he connected to an issue that was being ignored. Now, it's not that so many Americans actually cared that deeply about immigration. Immigration was always in the top 3 or 4 issues when people were polled about it, but it was in the single digits. So the economy was first, and national security was second, and immigration was kind of up there. But very few people know someone who's actually been a victim of a crime by an illegal alien. So it wasn't like he was touching a very wide constituency. But what these families represented were all the people that government was supposed to protect and had not protected. And that stood for a lot of people, whether it was Obamacare, which was supposed to take care of your health insurance, but just made it more expensive or harder to get, whether it was national security, all these terror attacks that weren't supposed to be happening, you had to rename them, call them something else in order to pretend they weren't happening, workplace violence or whatever it was. All the people that government was supposed to defend were being ignored. And that's why that image of him standing with these families caught on. And after that, all of the other things he used in his media career became amazing strengths. Some of the things that would have crashed any other campaign, the insult to John McCain, some of the things he said in various debates, these would have been taken as evidence of a fatal flaw among anyone else. But what he showed by fighting through each of these crises was that he doesn't give up. And that appealed to voters as well. The fact that he never gave up when he ran into one of these media outrage episodes, the fact that he fought through that right up through the end with the Access Hollywood tape. By the way, in the book, Larry Schweikart breaks down the data around that Access Hollywood tape, and he says that it probably cost Trump a couple of states. New Hampshire in particular, he says Trump probably lost New Hampshire because of the Access Hollywood tape, and also Minnesota, which Trump came very close to winning, but lost partly because of that tape and the way it played among female voters in particular, who didn't switch to Clinton but switched to third-party voters. These are female Republican voters. For a while, for a couple of weeks in the polls and in some of the early voting, and then they switched back. But his ability to persevere marked him as a candidate who would fight for people. And he would say, look, I've been greedy my whole life. I want to be greedy for America. And people had that same sense, I think, about his media crises. I'm fighting for my own political survival just as hard as I'll fight for you. And people respected that. There's one other aspect of that I think the media completely ignored. And the media are a big part of this story. I mean, my half of the book is essentially a chronicle of my campaign diary, my campaign journey with the media on the press plane. And there's something the media missed, and I guess it's best illustrated by this conversation I had with 2 young women at a rally in Michigan. Now, he was late for this rally, about an hour late, just north of Detroit. He wasn't usually late in the early parts of the campaign. As he packed more events into his schedule, it became later and later, so we were an hour or 2 late. It was an unseasonably warm evening, so nobody seemed to mind. All these kids were out there, all these young people, kids in Red Wings t-shirts, and there were union members. This was a rally, and he made sure to name check all the Democrats in the audience, and people loved it. So I asked these 2 young women the same thing I asked everybody at these rallies when I was covering them. Why are you here? What about Donald Trump is it that brings you out to this rally? And they said to me, we're here because he loves us. And that just sort of struck me. I said, he loves you? How do you know he loves you? I thought maybe this is a kind of celebrity thing. No, they said, he loves us because he gave up his career to do this for us. And it dawned on me that this is what people had been saying to me for almost a year, and that I hadn't heard it expressed quite that way. But the first Trump event I ever went to was in Las Vegas. It was a speech at the Westgate Casino, which, if you know Vegas, is way off the strip. The high rollers don't play at Westgate. It's a very nice place, but it's definitely aimed at a different market. He had 3,000 people in the room, and he had this instant connection with them, because here was this billionaire celebrity showing up on time for them, giving them an hour of his time, and letting them into his personal thoughts about the world. The media looked at Trump's speeches, which were extemporaneous and rambling, and they said, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, and he's crazy, and he's all off the cuff, stream of consciousness, it doesn't make any sense. But to the people in the room, he was just speaking as you would speak to an ordinary person, like talk to a relative at the table about the events of the day. And so it created this instant intimacy between him and the audience. And when these two young women said to me, he loves us because he's doing this for us, it wasn't just sort of starstruck celebrity, oh, I love my candidate kind of thing. It really was a feeling that a lot of people in these places felt about Trump. And when you take into consideration the fact that Hillary Clinton didn't even show up in some of these states, she never showed up in Wisconsin, for example, and Trump won Wisconsin by a landslide, basically. You realize that he was touching a nerve and reaching people who have been forgotten. And Steve Bannon will often talk about the forgotten man, forgotten woman. That's the title of a book by Amity Shlaes, actually, about the Depression. And Democrats lionize FDR for getting us out of the Depression, but what she writes is that FDR left a lot of people behind, that some of his policies, government, state-centered policies in the New Deal, many of which we're still living with today, actually stifled economic growth and left a lot of people behind who were written out of the history books. And that's how a lot of parts of America felt. These were places that were written out of the history books. They were supposed to go away. They were places that had been left behind by free trade agreements, or that had been left behind by new competition from immigration in the labor market, or whatever it was. He talked a lot about drug use and how that had taken over a lot of American communities. And I think that affected him very deeply. He heard about it a lot in New Hampshire, and he kept referring to this meeting in New Hampshire he had with people who struggled with drug addiction. And his view of the United States, the view he was getting from speaking with people who were victims but didn't want to be victims, was something the media missed, because the media don't feel like victims. The media feel like they run the country. What Donald Trump has upset is not their sense of political correctness. What is upset is their entitlement to rule. And what happened basically on November 8th was the country, at least for that moment and maybe for longer, reclaimed sovereignty. And that's how people felt. That's what they felt they were doing. The more I went along in these rallies, the more I heard answers from people when I asked them why they were there. They would say, we're here to watch history. We're here to be part of history. The people voting for him were absolutely convinced in many of these states that he was going to win. And none of the journalists were. I wasn't. I thought he was going to win the nomination but lose the election. And so when I initially wrote the book, you can ask the Regnery people, my working title was something like The Last Days of the Donald Trump Campaign. So something like suitably like macabre and like dark, the collapse of a giant figure in American politics, and at best it was going to be a story of a valiant effort that failed, but it ended up being something quite different. My co-author, Larry Schweikart, came at the topic from a completely different perspective. He is an historian. He wrote the book Patriots: History of the United States, which is very successful. And he also got into the data a little bit. And the reason he was in touch with Steve Bannon throughout the campaign, I later learned, was because Larry had assembled a group of volunteer analysts who had sources in various places, who had access to various kinds of data, and they were feeding the campaign on a volunteer basis all of this information that the professional pollsters were missing. Information like how many people had switched their registrations in a particular county, how many people were turning up for early voting, what things looked like on the ground in polling places. They had a network of people, of sources in various places who were giving them data that allowed the Trump campaign to make calculations. So one of the things that Larry predicted very early on was that Trump was going to win Ohio. And he didn't predict it in October, he predicted it the year before. He said, I'm looking at people changing their voter registrations from Democrat to Republican in the northern part of the state. If that continues, Trump is going to win Ohio.